So, when most people think about weight loss, what do they think of inevitably? The first thing that comes to most people's minds is diet and exercise. That's it. To some people, that's all weight loss is. There's no more to the conversation than diet and exercise. So, think about that for a minute. Is that what comes to mind for you? And is there anything else? Because most people would not say sleep. And it's one of the most significant oversights in how we talk about health. If I have a client on the program and they are struggling and we're going over everything and they're being compliant, they're doing what they're supposed to do, sticking to the plan to the T, the last thing I will ask them about is their sleep and their stress. I'll work back towards that. Actually, it's not always the last thing, but very often this is underlying everything. And I have a dozen years of evidence about this. Here's what you have to understand about sleep. It's not passive recovery. That's how we think about it. It's passive recovery. But it's an active, hormonally complex process, and it helps regulate things in your body. It helps regulate hunger. It helps regulate your fullness, your metabolism, something called your cortisol, right? Stress hormone, your insulin sensitivity. And insulin is the hormone that drives fat retention more than anything, right? That drives weight gain probably more than anything. And your ability to make decisions. And let's not underestimate this. When it's disrupted, when your sleep is disrupted, all of these systems take a hit simultaneously. And I want you to think about your body as a system with interrelated parts. And often we think we can compartmentalize, but that's harder than you think. So I want to walk you through exactly what happens inside your body when you're not sleeping well, and why no diet can fully compensate for it, and what you can actually do about it. And I want to tell you what the research says. And listen, the research on sleep is not complete. The research on anything is not complete. But there is some interesting research that has come out lately. In fact, just this month, July 2026, researchers tracked adults who slept about 78 minutes less than normal. And they did this for 6 weeks. So when I say 78 minutes, I mean per night. And that's not considered a dramatic sleep deprivation. It's just over an hour less than normal. And for a lot of people, that happens commonly. But here's what they found. Those participants gained nearly a pound over the 6 weeks compared to when they slept normally. And that's not changing anything else. Additionally, they became more sedentary simply because their bodies were operating at a lower energy state. The one thing nobody wants, nobody ever says, you know what, I really need less energy. I've never heard that. I think the number one reason people end up going to doctors in this country is because they're low energy. Either that or some kind of a pain, right? So sleep loss didn't just affect what they ate, it affected how much they moved. Now, sleep isn't the thing. This is what I want you to get. If you get nothing else from this talk, sleep isn't the thing that you do when you've finished everything else. It's part of your program. Now, that includes if you're on a formal program or just your life program. That's part of what makes the system operate better. Now, these people gained a pound over 6 weeks, and you might say, well, so what? A pound over 6 weeks? Not a big deal. Well, multiply that. Over a year, that's a significant weight gain without changing anything else, even if you're still trying to do the right things. And I have a feeling that this would only get worse over time. 6 weeks is a small window, but this would be an additive type of thing. I can't say that for sure, but it stands to reason that over time that would only worsen. So it might end up being, instead of what 9 pounds it would be over a year, it might accelerate. That might end up being 15 pounds over a year. And we have to discuss what happens hormonally. I want to walk you through the mechanism, because I think when you understand what's actually going on inside your body during sleep deprivation, it stops feeling like laziness and it starts feeling like your system being undermined. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's just foundational. We're talking about rudiments here. And we discussed this when we discussed the Knicks championship several weeks ago. You have to have those foundations in to reach your potential. It just doesn't happen otherwise. So let's first talk about two hormones that I love. They're called leptin and ghrelin. Why do I love them? I mean, I love them just because of how they sound. They sound like some kind of evil entities, like something you would confront in Harry Potter. And they work like that if they're not working right anyway. So leptin and ghrelin controls your hunger system. They're appetite hormones, and these are the two primary ones. Leptin is the fullness hormone. It's the one that tells your brain that you have enough energy stored and you don't need to eat. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. It tells your brain that you need food. Now, here's what you have to understand is that when you're not sleeping enough, independent of what you're eating, leptin will drop and ghrelin will rise. So your body is simultaneously telling you that it's not full and that it's hungry. So you've got both of these signals going on at once, and they're working against you. And this, by the way, is independent of the mental machinery that's going on at the same time, right? The mental and emotional machinery that's going on. It's, well, I say it's independent. I mean, it overlaps, right? But I just want you to understand how those particular hormones work. You do not need, of all the things you need in your life, you do not need hormones telling you that you're not full when you've eaten like a horse and that you're hungry in spite of eating like a horse. Okay? So, and I want to be honest here, right? There's nuance to the science. There's always nuance to the science. And one bad night is not going to produce consistent results, right? Yeah, there are times where we have to go without sleep. Life happens. I had a couple of clients here last week. They got a call while they were here. They had to leave. They had to leave because they had to go handle a family member who was in the hospital, right? And I have a friend recently, and her father took a sharp downhill turn, and, he passed. So this is just life. We're not solving that. So we have to work around it. And if we get a couple of nights of bad sleep, it doesn't mean that we're screwed. Okay. So let's not think in terms of like, oh my God, if you get really intense about it, it's probably going to affect you in the wrong way. But here's what the research consistently does show is that people who are sleep deprived eat more. They consume more calories. They reach for higher calorie food that tends to be high carbohydrate food specifically. So whatever the exact hormonal mechanism is, the behavioral outcome is reliable over time. The body wants to compensate for the energy that it's losing by not sleeping. And it tends to want the wrong things. It wants that quick hit. It's almost like self-medicating. But then there's another issue. And it's the cortisol issue. Another thing that nobody wants more of, right? Nobody needs more cortisol. So understand it this way, right? Sleep deprivation is a form of physiological stress. And your body responds to stress the same way that it does to physiological stress, that it does to chemical stress, emotional stress, right? Your body has a stress response. And a big part of that stress response is elevating cortisol. That's the primary stress hormone that goes up. But there's a problem with cortisol, right? Because cortisol, obviously, it has its purpose, and it has, good short-term benefits. But elevated cortisol does something that most people don't know, which is that it promotes visceral fat storage. So visceral fat is the fat that accumulates around your organs. It's not the fat that you can squeeze necessarily. It's the deep belly fat that's wrapped around your liver and your intestines and putting pressure on your heart and your lungs. This stuff sucks. Again, a thing that nobody needs. We have a refrain here. Things that nobody needs or wants in their life. Nonetheless, this is all part of the chain of events that happens when you're not sleeping enough, right? That visceral fat will go up. And the visceral fat is different metabolically from other kinds of tissue. So one of the things it does is it creates inflammation. And as a result of that, and inflammation is one of those buzzwords, we hear it a lot. We know it's not a good thing. Nobody needs more of it. So it's strongly associated with cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, right? Like I said, everything kind of overlaps with each other. Insulin resistance is when that insulin system is not working well, and that in and of itself will lead to fat storage. Also, type 2 diabetes, which is essentially insulin resistance when it passes a certain threshold. And two people that have the same BMI can have dramatically different health profiles depending in part upon their visceral health levels, right? The internal fat, the stuff you cannot squeeze, but you might be able to notice it and feel it because maybe the stomach is very prominent and it's hard. It's not soft necessarily. In fact, one of the things on the program that's really interesting, and I have to have this conversation with people on occasion, is that they start losing visceral fat. And as a result of that, their stomach feels softer. Pardon me. So the stomach feels mushier. And without having the understanding of visceral fat, they start interpreting that as, oh my God, am I gaining fat? Am I storing more? No, that's a natural part of the process, because when you have visceral fat, that visceral fat lies underneath the muscles of the abdomen. So it pushes out on it. So, that's why you have those people that have very hard stomachs. I had an uncle that was like that years ago. He used to, he had this huge stomach and it was like a rock. And he used to pound it and say, hey, look how prominent and strong my abdominal muscles are. And it was like, no, dumbbell, you had a lot of visceral fat. He's since passed. I won't speak ill of the dead, but that's essentially what was going on. I was too young to understand that, but that's exactly what I would have said to him. Okay, so chronic sleep deprivation chronically elevates cortisol, which means it's not just adding weight. It's directing the weight in the form of fat to the most dangerous locations. The heart is not going to work properly when there's pressure on it. It's going to work harder. That elevates blood pressure. It's one of the reasons why we get good results with blood pressure on the program. We don't treat it, but this is what happens. Okay? A little more about insulin sensitivity, because here's a finding that genuinely surprised researchers when they saw it in the study. Studies have shown that slow wave sleep, this is the deeper stages of sleep, it's specifically connected to insulin sensitivity. So when the deeper stages of sleep are suppressed, when you're not able to get into them, insulin sensitivity drops. Now, remember, we want insulin to be sensitive, right? We don't want it to be what we call resistant. The opposite of resistant is sensitive. We want it to work right. Sensitivity means it's working right. Okay? So that drops even when total sleep hours look normal. So there's a quality aspect here as well. And that means that you could be in bed for 8 hours, but if the quality is poor, if you're fragmented in your sleep, if you're not reaching deep sleep, your body's ability to manage your blood sugar is impaired. It's not working right. And this is particularly important for people dealing with blood sugar regulation, pre-diabetes, metabolic issues. Hours in bed is not the same as actual restorative sleep. Now, many people have sleep apnea. And it's not only overweight people who get it, although it's always worsened in people who are overweight, right? There are a lot of thin people walking around that have sleep apnea. It's not good. It's your body waking you up. It could be dozens of times in an hour if you have severe sleep apnea, because you're not breathing, right? So specifically, your brain is waking you up beneath the level of your awareness. But it does that to save your life. I mean, it's a really messed up kind of an issue. And it potentially contributes to all kinds of other things. So if you think you might have sleep apnea, and some of the things to look for are snoring, obviously. If your spouse might be aware of you, jolting up, when you're supposed to be sleeping, sometimes it becomes like a very noticeable thing where you'll wake up and you have trouble breathing, or, your heart is kind of pounding. Waking up with headaches is a thing, dry throat. So these are things to look at and look for. The dry throat would be because you're breathing through your mouth. Okay, if you have sleep apnea, please go get it checked out. There are no great solutions, but the relatively poor solutions that they have is better than no solution. Okay, and of course, losing weight will help. Sometimes losing weight will resolve sleep apnea. Often it won't, but it will definitely help. Okay, so we want to get into deep sleep. Poor sleep doesn't just make you tired, it makes you hungrier. It makes you store fat in the wrong places. It impairs your body's ability to manage blood sugar. It's doing all of these things at the same time. It's a spiral. It's a bad spiral. I was going to call it a death spiral, and eventually it might be. The problem is it doesn't kill you instantly. Right? When things happen more slowly, we tend to, hold it in a different place. Right? We're scared of things that we know will kill us instantly, whether it's a fire or a bear. We will react pretty quickly. But the things that can kill us slowly, we don't react in the same way. There's not the same urgency. And we're right in a sense because we have time to make changes. But if the changes aren't made, then the trajectory is going to occur. Okay, there's another problem with not sleeping. Most of you know about this. And I want to cover this because this has to be covered. And it's the fact that sleep deprivation will impair your ability to make decisions. It comes with a definite decision-making problem, right? When we're depleted, we don't have the inner fortitude to make the right decisions very often. And there's actually a physiological mechanism for this, which is that sleep deprivation will impair what they call the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that's at the front, and it's the part that's responsible for executive function and impulse control and decision making. And the food decisions that matter most for your health are exactly the kind of decisions that require this good, strong prefrontal cortex function. You need good executive decision making. Choosing the salad over the fries when you're tired is genuinely more difficult than when you're well rested. Everything is. There's a story I tell about this, about being well rested and not. I'm not going to tell it now, but it's just something that just became very clear to me when I was dealing with a particular situation, a recurring situation, and I was able to see very clearly how I was able to function when I was in a very tired and depleted state, as opposed to when I was in a well-rested and energetic state. It is night and day, I guarantee you. Sometimes we're so used to sucking it up and to go on fumes and on force of will that we forget that. We forget how much easier it is to function, to make decisions, to see decisions through when we are well rested, when we're not depleted. And studies have also shown that sleep deprived people find food more rewarding. And I guess that just makes sense, right? The brain's reward to high calorie food is amplified when you're under sleep deprivation. So get the picture here, right? Because what's happening is that if you're not getting the proper sleep, then you tend to be more impulsive and you're more attracted to the bad foods. Who has the energy when you're not getting sleep? And you could try this, stay up for a couple of days and see how well you do. But who has the energy to say no to quick calories that will temporarily make us feel good? It's very difficult. So remember, sleep is not the reward you get after you've been disciplined, right? It's not the reward to discipline. It's foundational. It makes discipline possible. Okay, good. So let's get to what we can actually do about it, right? Let's be practical. Here's what the evidence supports for improving your sleep quality beyond the obvious go to bed earlier. And by the way, go to bed earlier is not bad advice. Some people know they should be going to bed earlier, but they don't want to for a variety of reasons, right? So let's get more specific here. Number one, protect your wind down window. Okay, what does this mean? Well, it means that our bodies need a transition to go from a very active wake state to go into a sleep state. And that transition has to do with our body, our chemistry, right? Our biology. And interestingly enough, it involves a drop of core temperature. So slowing down is important. It involves a shift in our nervous system. So be aware of that. Screens will work directly against this because the blue light that comes from screens, right? Be it your iPad, your phone, your television. I mean, we're inundated with screens. It's going to suppress the correct chemistry that you need to get to sleep. I'm not saying words anymore. Right? I don't want to introduce too many words, but that's the bottom line. Okay. And then probably just as importantly, if not more importantly, when you're dealing with screens, you're also kind of energizing your cognition, right? You're forced to think, you're forced to process. You're thinking about things that happened that day. You're thinking about things that you need for the next day. And so in that state, your body can't wind down because the mind is still running hot. So winding down means winding down. Now, a practical thing you could do there is write down what you need to write down for the next day. Get it out of this cognitive kind of loop that you might be going through. So a 30 to 60 minute screen-free wind down is highly, highly suggested. There's a reason I mentioned this first, right? We're not talking about a supplement, not a gadget. Just remove the thing that's interfering. Famous chiropractor once said the body needs no help, just no interference. Remove that interference. Okay, as I mentioned, core body temperature needs to drop. It needs to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit for sleep to initiate and to deepen. So sleep in a cool room, somewhere between 65 and 68 degrees is recommended. It accelerates that process. And this is a consistently supported fact when it comes to sleep research. Consistency. This is the challenge, right? It's hard to do it consistently, but that's why you need this ritual. An hour and a half before bed, start lowering the lights, shut off the screens, right? Write down the things you need to write down. Do whatever your going to bed ritual is, which hopefully includes brushing your teeth, among other things. Okay. Sleep timing matters as much as total hours. You want to go to bed at roughly the same time every day, including weekends. Your body just does better on a predictable schedule. Okay. Be careful about afternoon caffeine, because in most people, the half life of caffeine is like 5 to 7 hours. So a cup of coffee at 3 p.m. might interfere with your sleep. And it's not just keeping you awake, it's also suppressing the ability to get into deep sleep. So this cutoff really matters, right? And it's probably an individualized thing, but you need to be aware of it. Protein, they say protein in the evening is very helpful. It supports sleep quality. And there's a suggested mechanism, and it has to do with activating these hormones. Okay. So protein, if you're going to have dinner, have protein. And of course, address your stress load. We always talk about stress. We have to, right? Stress is what sabotages everything. And sleep deprivation and stress, they share the same cortisol pathway. So they're related in that way, but they're also related, in this bad kind of negative loop, right? In the sense that if we're not sleeping, we're more stressed. If we're more stressed, we tend to get less sleep. So we want to intervene in that loop. That cycle will feed itself. So do whatever you need to do to reduce your stress load, which means handling the things you need to handle, right? The real life things that need to be done, but also things like movement and breathing and being outside and social connections. These are also interventions that can help your sleep. So ultimately, people talk a lot about what to eat and the fact that they need exercise and that muscle is better metabolically than fat. And all of that is true. But how are you sleeping? Because no meal plan is going to overcome chronic sleep deprivation, right? It's going to mess with your hormonal environment. And again, if you look at your body as a system, that system needs certain things in place. It needs the right hormones at the right qualities, right? Or quantities, I should say, and the right relationships, because everything affects everything else. You don't want your fat going to the wrong place, which will happen when one of your hormones, cortisol, is out of whack. And then your brain's ability to make good decisions is running at a reduced capacity. So think of sleep as an active process. It's not just passively you laying there, right? It's when your body does the work of healing. So this week, do at least one thing that we talked about today, right? And the wind down window is a good one. If that's not something that you do, if you can start to do that, get that wind down window right, then please do it. If that's something you already do correctly, then maybe look at room temperature or, not having the caffeine at 3 p.m., right? Start somewhere, one little step. You never know how far it can go and how much it can help you. Give your body the conditions it needs. Everything else becomes easier after that. Thank you for being here. I will speak to you next week.